Hi, my name is Reece Roberson. I'm here today to tell you why Edward de Vere is the true author of Shakespeare's poetry and plays. We have studied both sides of this argument and feel confident in the fact that Edward de Vere is the true author. A little bit of background knowledge on what Shakespeare is and Edward de Vere are. Shakespeare is a famous author of poetry and plays. He was the man known for the great creation of the Globe Theatre. The Globe Theatre was a big theatre that performed for anyone from nobles to peasants. It was just a big theatre that was probably one of the most famous ones back in the day. Edward de Vere is a man that was from the same time period. He was of a higher class than Shakespeare, and he was highly educated. So the issue that we have today is that if Edward de Vere was the true author, he needs to get the credit that he deserves. If you were Edward de Vere and potentially the greatest writer that ever lived, would you still take credit for your own plays even if it destroyed your reputation? In this time, people of higher class were not meant to be playwriters. Playwriters were of a lower class, around just to entertain the higher nobles and kings. So it was kind of frowned upon for a higher guy in the class system to write plays. One of our first contention that we have today is the similar poetry they found of Edward de Vere's. Edward had a very similar style to the style that they found in Shakespeare's. They found a booklet with some of the poems with Edward de Vere's name on them, and they were the same as, they looked the same as what the ones that Shakespeare had written. And then our second contention is the fact that many of the events in Shakespeare's poems are very similar to Edward de Vere's life. One similarity that I found was in Hamlet. It talks about young men falling out of tennis. This is believed to be about a time in Edward de Vere's life when he was playing tennis with Sydney. I found this information at ShakespeareAuthorship.org. Our third contention is that the education of de Vere versus Shakespeare. Edward de Vere was highly educated, while they have nothing to prove whether Shakespeare went to school or not. De Vere graduated from Cambridge University and was studied in the law. I found this all at absoluteshakespeare.com. De Vere also had background in the court systems and knew law. One kind of funny thing is that in the court system, de Vere had a nickname that was Spear Shaker, which is very close to Shakespeare, so that's kind of funny how they both had similar names. Edward de Vere was also known to have composed and directed and acted in plays around the same time as Shakespeare. He was just kind of under the radar, nothing big, did a few plays here and there, but this was also found at absoluteshakespeare.com. So in conclusion, I think I've shown that Edward de Vere is the true author of Shakespeare and that he needs to get the credit that he deserves for his writing, because anybody that was considered to be one of the greatest writers in the world should be able to get credit for that. And that's all I have for today. Thank you. you guys get like a 2-minute time period.
Hello, my name is Sierra, and I am here to do the negative side of saying that Shakespeare is a writer of his plays. So, I say that he is a writer just because there isn't evidence of him going back to school, or he did go to school. That doesn't mean that he couldn't have written his plays. There's a lot of people back then that didn't go and have an education but still could become successful. One of our contentions is that goes along with the education, or the events of his life, is that there was one event that happened that inspired shipwreck after De Vere had died and Shakespeare was writing plays still. Our second contention would be that his cover-ups, like not wanting people to know that he was writing his plays, just he wanted people to cover himself up so that people wouldn't be like his famous. And the third contention of ours is there is a solid body of evidence that Shakespeare did write his plays and poems. I got that from Shakespeare.com, that there is a real person like Shakespeare. There is also evidence that the different handwritings is his, that the printing back then was different and it started to change, so that's why his name was spelled wrong, because the way they printed it didn't come out right. And that was also from Shakespeare.com that I got this information from. Based on all this evidence, we are saying that Shakespeare did write his plays and his poems, because in it he was also an actor of them, and each event he did have something to do with.
Taylor, and I'm arguing for the side of Edward de Vere and how he should get the authorship of the poems and plays that was written. Since Shakespeare hardly had any education, how was he able to write so well and produce so many plays that are still known today, whereas Edward de Vere was highly educated and had background in the court system, and he once studied law. He also earned 2 master's degrees before turning 17, so I see it as more of his work instead of Shakespeare's. And as the Sierra brought up, there was really solid evidence for William and his writings, but they never pointed out what solid evidence was. So it would be good to know that. There's more support for de Vere as since he was the Earl of Oxford. Oxfordians believe that de Vere was a big financial supporter, and he also took a trip to Italy, giving the background of most of the plays in Italy. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Serena Gutierrez, and I am on the negative side, saying that Shakespeare is the one who did write his own works. As Taylor said, that Shakespeare wasn't really well educated, and de Vere was, but there were a lot of people back then who weren't well educated that still became successful. And you don't have to go to school and go to law school and all that stuff just to know how to write plays, and if you can do it, then it happens and you can do it. Our first contention was that de Vere had died in 1604, and Shakespeare, he was still turning out plays as late as 1613, and quite a few of Shakespeare's plays and sonnets were written and revised quite a while after de Vere's death in 1604. Some of the examples are found in Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, King Lear, The Tempest, Timon of Athens, and Henry VIII. Furthermore, Shakespeare's sonnets were still being written as late as 1621, and the best examples of those sonnets are Sonnet 37, 66, 89, and 125. And I found that at thetruthaboutshakespeare.com. About the cover-ups, Shakespeare may have had cover-ups because he didn't want anyone to know that he was writing his own plays. He wanted to protect playwrights' privacy, to come up with the best plays, and to get his plays out, while still protecting his family's privacy and preventing the risk that his authorship would become widely known. The body of evidence to show that the real person named William Shakespeare did write his plays and poems. No Elizabethan documents supports the claim that Shakespeare's plays and poems were written by someone else. He may have had some co-authors for his plays, but he did write them himself. Thank you for this opportunity, this time, and
Alright, so one of the biggest arguments that Shakespeare people have is the fact that Edward de Vere died in 1604 and the plays were still going on through 1613. But what I say is, how do we know that Edward de Vere did not write the plays before he was dead? There's no proof of when the plays were written. They could say they were written at any time, but whether or not they were is a whole different story. You may think you don't need education to be able to write plays and be successful, but how do you even know how to write and read if you haven't been to schooling? So schooling is needed to be successful in the writing career. Edward de Vere was a true author. He had very similar style to his poetry and was just very well man. He was just hiding behind Shakespeare because he was too high a class to write poetry and plays. He didn't want to be looked upon like that. Some people also say that he could have been hiding behind Shakespeare's name so that he had freedom of what he wrote, so that he could say whatever in his plays and poems and not get in trouble for it, and nobody would know it was actually him. So I think we've shown why Edward de Vere is a true author. There's just no way that Shakespeare had the knowledge or the background to be able to write poetry at the level that the poetry was written. Thank you.
So, even though there is no proof that Shakespeare did not school, he went to school for a little bit so he could have learned that he was writing, how to read and write in that little bit of time, so he could have written his own plays. And I still think that Shakespeare wrote them because why would he not, and also even though there is no evidence of him actually saying that he did it, I still believe he did it because he seems like if he would. But there is also no true evidence that de Vere had done his own plays. Even though he did have education, doesn't mean that he could have written these. Because he did go to law school, it doesn't mean he had the ability to write such great plays and poems that he did.
When Sierra said that Shakespeare could have written his plays, well, he could have, but it's just not plausible. There's more evidence backing up de Vere with his education, his background history, how Hamlet could be based off of his life, and how well known he was. Of course, he was of higher class than Shakespeare, so I could see how he could hide behind Shakespeare, which is what he probably wanted to do. So within this debate, I think that overall we are looking for an affirmative ballot. Thank you.
Well, as Taylor said, DeVere had more education than Shakespeare and all of that, but what if Shakespeare looked into other people's lives for inspiration for his plays, like about the Tempest and the Hamlet? Maybe he liked to, like I said, look for inspiration and write about other people's lives. So I think that Shakespeare is the one who did write his plays. There's going to be debate. There has been debate for a long time, and there's still going to be debate going on. But in the end, I think Shakespeare is the one who did write his plays, and we're looking for a negative ballot.